When I work with married guys who want to break their porn habit, they generally fall into one of two categories or circumstances. Either their wife already knows, or else she has no idea at all. I don't think I've ever worked with a husband whose wife knows but doesn't care if he stops or not. In any case, if you're in that latter category, your wife has no idea at all, and you know you need to disclose this problem to her, then today's episode is for you.
The Marriage Podcast for Smart People is designed to help busy couples like yourselves move away from conflict and unhappiness to build a marriage you'll love today and treasure for a lifetime. This podcast is made possible by listeners like you. Learn how you can help save marriages, prevent divorces, and keep families intact by going to oyf.support. Once again, that website is oyf.support. And now, here are your hosts, Caleb and Valinda Simone Gandel from Only You Forever.
Welcome to the Marriage Podcast for Smart People. If you want to build a thriving, passionate marriage, we've got the research, the truth, and the answers you're looking for, even about very difficult ideas like the idea of disclosing that we're going to be talking about today. This is episode number 215, and today we are going to be going through how and when to disclose your porn addiction to your wife. You're possibly just sick thinking about that, and it's going to be tough to do, but we want to help you do this right.
Hey there, before we get started, if you missed last week's episode, we discussed the ACE, the Adverse Childhood Experiences Study, and how those issues can impact marriage and also how marriage can help a person heal from difficult child experiences. Worth going back and checking out. Also, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any upcoming shows from us.
And as always, we offer you sound research-based advice, and most of all, we offer hope. Okay, let's get into this topic for Linda, disclosure of pornography addiction.
Okay.
And let me say a couple things right off the bat here. First, totally want to invite you to speak on behalf of wives who are receiving this. So most of the time I work with the addict, the person who's been looking at pornography. And however, I do work with spouses sometimes too. Yeah. So I've tried to be sensitive to that as I've put this material together, but I just would definitely.
Generally the wives that reach out to me.
Yes.
Yeah.
So let me say right off the bat too that over the last 10 years, the number of women using porn has drastically increased. So we could have just as easily titled this How and When to Tell Your Husband About Your Porn Addiction. Mm-hmm. But it's still the case that the majority of users are male, and we don't mean any additional stigma towards female users by doing this. But, rather than flipping genders all the way through, we went with the more traditional assumptions.
Okay.
So please, we ask you to pardon the male references. Much of what we have to say would, of course, apply just as well to a wife disclosing to her husband for the first time.
Okay.
So I think the starting question is, should I tell my wife? To which the short answer is yes. We think so.
Okay. In
our broader culture over the past decades, porn was viewed as something normal and harmless.
Really?
When I say past decades, I mean like 80s, 70s, 60s, back in there.
Okay.
And keeping in mind, for Linda, that a lot of the porn that was out there was much milder than what is out there today. Not that, that makes it morally better.
Okay.
And I think, some folks still hold this view, but in recent years, the research has consistently shown that porn use has a wide range of adverse effects on marriage and on the people using the porn and the people who are in the porn industry. And not all, but many of the actors and actresses there are victims of human trafficking and have other very challenging issues that they're facing on a daily basis. So I'm just kind of saying here that, it's only been in the last 5 years, I think off the top of my head, that you have like the Washington Post and New York Times and these major secular papers raising questions about, is this really good for us?
Yes.
So we talked more extensively about how porn impacts marriage in episode 163. If you want to go back to that, if that's of interest to you, you can get that at oyf.link/163. The number is 163. And just to recap that, to summarize that very quickly, it impacts through reduced marital satisfaction, through reduced commitment, possibly leading to increased risk of infidelity, not necessarily, possibly. Number 3, reduced sexual satisfaction. And 4, reduced intimacy. So it's really...
And people think it's harmless.
It's kind of gutting your marriage, right?
Mm-hmm.
On top of that, the consequence of keeping the addiction a secret can be just as damaging as the addiction itself. So keeping parts of your life hidden from your spouse and the shame that surrounds the secret and the fear of being discovered, all of those erode the trust and intimacy between a couple, even if one partner doesn't know that's what's happening. A couple of researchers in 2009 found that the secrecy creates a crack in the marriage bond, is how they described it, which is then likely to widen as the husband's shame and fear causes him to emotionally withdraw. Because you're hiding something, and that's easy to go from hiding something to hiding.
And keeping it a secret and those lies and the secrecy, the wives often say like, that's worse than the actual act itself, than the actual use of porn or whatever. That's all harder to deal with.
When she finds out.
Yes.
Right?
Okay. This is even before she finds out.
And so even before she finds out, though, I often say like every secret is a brick.
Building a wall.
Yep.
Huh.
So
I liked what you said about hiding.
Okay. What part of that?
What did you say? You said something about it's easy to go from hiding a secret to hiding.
Yeah.
I can see that.
Yeah. So that's the reduction of intimacy, right? It's the
reduction.
result.
Yeah.
So telling your spouse is an essential first step in change. Keeping it a secret promotes the cycle of shame, again referring to a study here from 2001. Shame and negative feelings compel you to want to use porn to feel better, which creates further shame. That cycle gets harder and harder to break out of unless you tell someone about it and admit to needing help. Somebody sees you, that's important. It helps.
Okay.
So next question often comes up is, can I just tell someone else? And that's a valid question. You understand that this disclosure is going to hurt her the most. Mm-hmm. And I do think you need to bring in one or two same-sex friends into your confidence and learn to be open and honest with them. Like if you're a guy, you need to have a couple of guy friends that get to see you. That's an important part of recovery. A lot of the guys...
Hang on. They get to see you.
See into your heart, that you're open and vulnerable with and honest with.
You honestly.
They really know you well.
Okay.
You need a couple of bro dudes, or girlfriends if you're a woman. Because almost all the men I meet in this situation or work with, they have a lot of friends, but they don't have any close friends.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so there's not only is their intimacy pretty limited in the marriage, but it's generally they're craving and very much starved for intimacy.
That closeness.
Yeah.
Huh. Okay.
I want to tell someone else, but at the same time, it's your wife who's been betrayed by your actions. So unless you've really put some kind of pretense out to others, they won't feel the same sense of betrayal that she does.
Right. Yeah.
She has the right to know that the most important person in her life has betrayed her deeply. And we actually had this discussion recently amongst our counseling team. Is there ever a situation where it makes sense not to disclose? And one possible situation, I don't know, and everything is very unique and individual in these kinds of circumstances, but one possibility you wonder about is if either of you is on your deathbed. So not only is there the shattering impact of loss right in front of you, but also if you divulge an incredible betrayal, the loss of who you thought who your spouse thought you were, or who you thought they were. And that creates some profoundly complex grief to sort through. And it may just not be fair in a situation like that. Or even if you're in the middle of some other major crisis. I've had stories of men revealing infidelity when their wife is undergoing cancer treatment. It's like they feel like they've sinned and they need to
confess it and get it out.
Yeah.
Oh.
And she's like half dead in chemo.
Uh-huh.
And he dumps this on her. So timing. And we'll get to timing in a little bit. The fundamental components of having a happy marriage are things like commitment and loyalty and trust. And you can't keep a porn addiction secret and hope to simultaneously do well at those three things.
Commitment, loyalty, and trust.
Yeah.
Okay.
And not only that, but keeping it a secret, even if she never asks about it, that's an act of dishonesty. And it's my belief that dishonesty is morally wrong. In our Christian faith, we call that sin. It's an offense against God. And I'm not mentioning this to guilt anyone, but to uphold the fact that the truth always sets a person free. And especially this kind of problem, wrong or sin, it perpetuates and it builds itself. It snowballs.
Okay.
And that's a risk. And so in this case, coming to the truth is going to hurt badly. And things are going to get worse before they get better. But if you can't live in full transparency and honesty with your spouse, then your intimacy development will always be arrested by that reality. Going to be bricks going on that wall all the time.
Yeah, yeah.
And, at the same time, as I was going through this, like thinking about guys in this situation, they're listening, I get it about, like you probably feel sick about disclosing the problem. It's probably a huge shame trigger. The right thing to do is not always the easy thing to do. And yet at the same time, it's only a decision that you can make. And I'm giving, so when I say you, I'm speaking to the listener here, I'm giving you the various parts to consider. And I have a definite bias towards disclosure, but I can't make that decision for you because I can't accept responsibility for the outcome of your decision. I don't bear the consequences of your decision. Those are yours alone to bear. So the decision is yours alone as well. Okay. So while we're exhorting you towards something, and this is not just me kind of washing my hands, but me just saying, you know what?
You have to live with the consequences.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, you were saying, not me.
Yes, but where I'm challenging you to really think about is that the long-term consequences of not disclosing may be higher than the consequences of disclosing.
Right.
Yeah.
And the intimacy that can be built can mean that like it's a way closer outcome than not disclosing at all.
Yeah. And the other thing to think about too, like we often, especially when you're in an addiction, like you're so split off from reality and consequences, it's hard to think all these things through. Let's say you have a porn addiction for 10 years of your marriage. You finally sober off it. Never look at it again for 20 years. Okay, so now you're at year 30 in your marriage and you kind of get, you know what, I need to get honest with my wife. So you basically get credit for 30 years of lies. Yeah. Whereas in your head, you're going, it was 10 years at the start. I stopped. I've been good for 20 years, twice as long. She should be okay. Not going to happen.
No.
So that's why I do lean towards sooner is better, and tough one though. So once again, we do have additional material for this episode. If you're planning to disclose or have recently disclosed, then one of your top priorities will be the work of rebuilding trust. And our bonus material for today's episode tells you how to work on rebuilding that trust again with your spouse. You can get this by becoming a patron of the Marriage Podcast for Smart People. And we'll take a quick 60-second break here to tell you more about that.
What happens when the fairy tale marriage meets reality? Too often, high expectations lead to disappointment, communication breaks down, and the struggles of day-to-day life become overwhelming, leaving you feeling lost and without hope. Unfortunately, marriage does not come with an instruction manual. Marriage troubles are deeply personal and can take a toll on you, your spouse, and your family. Counseling can be expensive and divorce is very costly. It doesn't have to be this way. Caleb and Valinda understand your pain and frustration. Their mission is to help save as many marriages as possible, and to date, thousands of couples are helped through their weekly podcast. But the most important marriage they want to help save is yours. With a minimum of a $10 investment a month, you gain access to exclusive bonus content and valuable information to help you succeed in your own marriage. Learn more about saving marriages and how you can help at oyf.support. That's oyf.support.
You're listening to the Marriage Podcast for Smart People. Before the break, we were talking about disclosing to your wife.
Yeah, I'm struggling with that.
Okay, with what part?
Yeah, I'm struggling with that.
Okay, with what part?
Well, like you said at the end there, like someone's looked at it for 10 years, they've been sober for 20, and yet they know that if they tell their wife they're responsible for 30 years of lies, or that's what it's going to feel like in their wife's mind.
Yeah.
Like, how can that be a good thing? Like, I'm all for disclosing, but I'm battling this through in my mind. Like, how is this going to be better?
Right.
I think you have a hard time convincing somebody that.
On the back of what kind of a marriage?
Well, I don't know.
Right. So, yeah. So again, this is the reason why we can't make the decision for other people.
Yeah. And
if you're in this situation, it's very much worth talking to a therapist and just navigating this and trying to understand all the potential impacts of disclosure. But because it so much depends on context, right? So let's say it's year 30, the couple's just finished launching all their kids and they really realize now that their marriage is 1 inch deep.
Yeah, but what if they're on year 30 and they have a thriving, passionate marriage?
Right. So those are two very different circumstances.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, but the thing that I come back to is, so think about yourself with the reality of this kind of infidelity, and you're in a thriving, passionate marriage, and your wife is raving about how much she appreciates you, and you've always been there for her. And inside your head, you're going, I am such a fake. So, how is it really that good? I mean, is the marriage likely to be like that?
Yeah, I guess the potential of what it could be should be the drawing card.
Yeah, that's what I would wonder, right? So, I mean, you have to think about where you're at and what the consequences are now.
Yeah.
Let's just go with, you know what? While we encourage people towards disclosure and we believe that truth and honesty are always the better way to go, it may not be a slam dunk for every marriage.
No, it might be the end of the marriage.
Yeah, it might just be a slam.
Yeah.
So let's proceed on the basis that we do have someone and this thing is still real and they want out of their porn addiction and they want to stay married and they want to get honest.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So how do we do that?
Okay. So if you're looking at telling your wife, the first thing to know is you need to be sensitive during this process. And that means, first of all, developing awareness of the impact it could have and is likely to have on her. So revealing that you have been unfaithful to your wife through porn use can and likely will lead to definitely will lead to feelings of betrayal, may lead to trauma even. Similar to that found after discovering an affair.
Okay.
So the disclosure, and again, this is, it's not like I went out and had sex with anyone. That doesn't help your wife saying that.
Oh, well, like giving as an excuse.
Yes.
Like, oh, it's not that bad. I didn't do that.
Yeah.
Oh, I see what you're saying.
The emotional betrayal response is the same for pornography disclosure as for infidelity disclosure. Mm-hmm. The only thing that's different is you don't have the risk of an STD in your spouse, right? And so,
but pointing that out wouldn't be a help either. No.
I would just say, let's be aware that she's going to be very shaken.
Yes.
By this disclosure. Allow her to respond with whatever emotions she has or needs to express. Allow her anger to come. Don't be surprised by the severity of her emotional response. And you do need to let her have her pain. You need to acknowledge her pain. And I actually think also it's going to be very healthy for your own recovery to witness her pain. Stay there, stay present, look at it, let that burn into your eyes, the visage of your wife as she processes the betrayal. Another thing to do is to tell her all at once. So guys often think they can soften the blow by spreading out the disclosure.
Oh, that is so not true.
Yeah, it has the opposite effect. A staggered disclosure, which is telling her small pieces over time, leads to greater trauma. Think about it this way. If you had, I don't know if this illustration is going to work for Linda, you can let me know. If you had one major car accident, you'd be a little hesitant about climbing back in the vehicle after you recovered.
Yeah.
But you need to get on with life. But if you were rear-ended once every 5 to 15 days, 8 times.
Yeah.
So over the course of, 2-3 months, you had 8 slams from the back.
Yeah.
You'd probably be much more likely to swear off driving and just take a bus. Like, it's just like every time you go out the door, you're like, man, I'm freaked out.
Am I going to get hit again?
Yeah. Each time you're hit again, or to exacerbate the physical injuries previous to those and increase your level of jumpiness, your fear around driving, that's trauma. Okay. Now, a staggered disclosure is a great way to amplify trauma. That makes sense? So you do need to disclose fully in one sitting. Were you going to add something to this?
Well, I hear this. Like, a few weeks later, they say...
She finds out more.
He told me more.
And it's the same
like
emotional response
lie.
as the first time.
Yeah. And it's just like all over again.
Yeah. So your wife will only be able to start trusting you fully once the entire secret is out in the open. So we're going to go through what to tell her below as part of considering this, but disclosing little bits over time makes it harder for her to trust you, as it will always feel like there could be more that she still doesn't know about.
Yeah. Yes.
So everything all at once. Also, accept full responsibility. Yes.
I can see how a guy would be like, oh, that would be so overwhelming. Like, I can't do that to her. And yet it's the better way to go. And
maybe a sincere attempt to protect her from all the pain that he knows it's going to cause.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But sometimes what we do to save our marriage is actually what destroys it.
Yes. True that.
You still need to write that book.
Profound. I do. So second item, accepting full responsibility. Don't try to justify your actions. Don't try to minimize how significant the betrayal is to her. Definitely do not blame it on her for not having sex with you enough.
Do people do that?
Yes. These kinds of excuses and justifications will make the disclosure even harder for your wife and can get in the way of her forgiving you and moving on. I don't mean to say moving on tritely, but just her recovery. Okay? You can only recover to yourself once you've taken full responsibility for your actions. So that's another thing, is you got to own it and you got to eat crow.
And so by minimizing, you're saying like, well, it's not actually that bad.
Yeah.
Or like, aren't you over it by now?
Which is telling her that you don't think it's serious, so you're very likely to do it again.
Oh.
So, and you're wondering why she's freaking out on you?
Yeah. Okay.
Number 2, and this one's a little tricky, but as much as possible, have a plan for both of you. So some researchers in 2005 found that the disclosure often works best if the husband comes to the wife with a plan of action right away. So, for example, he may admit the problem and suggest therapy right away, or block access to the porn sites he uses. Asking your wife what action she would like to take is also a good idea.
Oh, okay.
So, and I want to say this next part carefully too, seeing the addiction as a joint problem that both the husband and wife are managing. So not joint as in we both caused it, but be glad for your help to help solve this. But which, of course, the husband, even though he's inviting her to help him, he's still taking full responsibility for their issue.
Okay.
That can help aid the recovery process.
Okay. So when you say have a plan for both of you, you don't mean that the husband comes in like, okay, this is the problem. I've got it all sorted out. This is what you're going to do. This is what I'm going to do.
No.
Like that would be like, no thanks.
Correct. And not even sounding like, he has it all bagged and figured out, so she should be fine. Yeah,
exactly.
But I think it would be very helpful for a wife to see that, if this addiction is present and ongoing, that he's going and getting the therapist.
Okay.
And he's reading the books.
So she's not
and he's
trying
finding
to manage it.
a pornography recovery group.
Okay.
Rather than, she's the one who's upset and he goes back to work and keeps living his life. And she's the one reading all the books about betrayal and yada, yada. So, because it does often work out that way, that we see the wife doing all the emotional work and the psychological work. And he's dumped this on her and he's not really as worried about it. In fact, he probably feels relieved because he's finally got it off his chest.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
So that's, after the first week, that's not going to go well.
Okay.
Because she's not going to feel safe.
So it's not a bad thing that she, reads books that would help her or anything.
Yeah, for sure.
But if she's the only one doing anything to promote healing, then that's where the problem comes in.
Correct.
Gotcha. Okay.
So then the question, when do I tell her? Now, there is no good time to disclose, but there are a lot of particularly bad times to disclose.
Okay.
Often guys, I've noticed, will disclose in strange situations, or they look strange from my side of the chair.
Right. They must have some reasoning for it.
Like at their in-laws for Christmas, or right before a major church function, or just before taking the kids out to a family birthday party.
Really?
Oh, yeah. You wouldn't believe it. And I'm not sure why it happens, but
you told me not to be judgmental in this episode. That was extremely judgmental.
Oh, sorry.
Like, you wouldn't believe it.
But I'm just saying it's okay, I'm being defensive. I apologize to everybody.
That was not even like an honest apology.
My mom told me to say I'm sorry.
Yeah, no kidding.
Okay.
So they're surprising to us.
Yes.
Because we don't see the sense behind it. But obviously in their mind, there must be some reasoning as to why they did it then.
Yes. And I kind of wonder if it's things like he just needs to get it off his chest, or it's like, you know what, like I'm about to go to church. And
I can't fake it anymore.
No, so I'm going to tell you right before church and I'm going to feel great with the Lord.
Yes.
In an hour here. And such a sense of relief while you kind of hold it together as we stagger in the front door. And
yes.
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 So I think that's why it goes like that sometimes.
Okay.
And so that's really, I'm going to be judgmental again. That's a selfish consideration.
Yeah.
So if you know it's going to be a blow, and it is, just think this through about timing. What can you do? Okay, so maybe arranging for a babysitter, even, so the kids are not at home, or at least like start early in the evening or at the beginning of a weekend if your weekend is clear. And so this is kind of me coming back to having a bit of a plan. Like if your wife had no idea this was happening, she is going to cave. Her world is going to shatter. So disclosing 1 hour before a family dinner is not the right time.
Yeah.
And disclosing before you go off on a business trip for 3 days is not the right time. She'll need you around to ask questions. She'll need time and space to be alone, to process. So try to pick a time where you can clear the calendar a bit. And she's going to need to be able to reach out to her friends, even though that may be really difficult for her to do, kind of depending on what those relationships are like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, you said she'll need time and space to be alone. Do you mean alone as a couple, alone as a person?
Both.
Yeah, okay.
Yep. It may be wise too to have a counselor or one of your mentors. Like if you guys have had as a couple, if you've had a mentor or the person that's married you, maybe a family friend on standby or one of the elders from your local church. You need to just tell them, you know what? Hey, I have to have a difficult conversation with my wife tonight. I'm not sure if she'll want to talk, but would you be available if she did?
Right. Okay.
Okay. So the only caveat here, though, is to be careful about bringing a friend of hers into the secret and or yours, and having her friend hold that secret. That could feel like a double betrayal. So if you're going to do that, you have to.
So-and-so knew?
Yeah, I've known for like 6 months while I've been trying to get up the courage to tell you. Oh, I've been wondering why they've been avoiding me. And then it's like, you knew this whole time and you never told me to the friend, right?
Okay.
So you want to keep the timing on this really tight if you choose this option.
Okay.
Yeah. Another good option to consider is having some resources on hand, even books, our article on our site, What to Do When You've Just Discovered Your Husband's Porn Habit, oyf.link/131.
Yeah.
Just saying, you know what, honey, I know this is brutal for you and you're not even sure where to go, but this might be a starting point.
Right.
Deborah Lazer's book, I often recommend, Shattered Vows is the name of that book. So having some of that, don't expect a kiss and a warm hug, but at least show some. It
shows that you care about her and you know that it's going to have affected her and you want her healing.
Yes.
It's not all about me and what I did, but you have feelings.
And I'm assuming that guys who care enough to have listened this far into the episode are in that place.
Right.
Right.
Right. Otherwise they'd have turned us off long ago.
Yeah. So again, for her, when you disclose the addiction, that's going to be like her finding out about an affair. It can produce a trauma response. It may take weeks or months for her to fully process this. So pick a time when she's ready to hear it, and we'll have some immediate time to react to kind of go through that crisis.
Okay.
At the same time, the longer you leave it, the worse it can get, both in terms of how hard it will be to break the shame cycle for yourself and in terms of how much of a betrayal it will represent to your wife.
Okay.
So with sensitivity in mind, sooner, I think, is probably still better than later. Now, the question, what do I tell her? In order for your wife to feel safe in the relationship again and start trusting you, you need to become totally honest with her about the nature and the extent of the addiction. Only when all those secrets are out can trust start to be reformed between you. So generally, it's best to follow your wife's lead on this and give her as much detail and context as she wants to know. Now, let me just kind of qualify this in a moment here. So men often struggle with this due to the shame that they feel around their porn addiction because they fear it will upset their wives further to hear about it. But the failure to be honest and open was found to be the main obstacle in healing the relationship in a study from 2005.
Okay.
So
failing to be honest and open was an
obstacle.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it is an important goal to have. The same study found that wives are often sympathetic to the fact that disclosing the full extent of the addiction is very difficult, and they responded positively when their husbands took that step. So having to be honest may not be as bad as you're expecting in one way.
Okay.
In the sense of not being fully honest is definitely going to be worse.
Okay. So in an affair disclosure, like you say who, when, where.
Yeah.
But you say don't go into the details of the what.
Yeah, like the sexual encounters and positions.
So what about with pornography?
While revealing explicit details, showing her the porn that you have used is very likely to be unhelpful.
Okay.
Those details can create unpleasant mental images for your wife. And even the sense of, like, I have to compete with that, right?
Yeah.
Which can lead to traumatic flashbacks for her and increased distress.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think how you access the porn, where you accessed it, when you accessed it, how often you accessed it.
Okay. All
those things are important. I mean, there's additional, I don't think the kinds of porn is helpful. Although if there's child pornography, I mean, there's definite legal consequences there based on the state that you're in. And you may have really put your family at risk financially and legally. So I'm not saying not to disclose that, but, you know, that adds a whole nother layer of complexity and potential harm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so, you know, being honest about that might be also being honest about the potential consequences of what you've done.
Okay.
And the implications of it and finding legal help and that kind of thing. Yeah, that goes to, that's the next level of stuff. So is that okay for what to tell her?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I just was wondering about the details.
Yeah. And then finally showing a commitment to change. So again, that study from 2005, they interviewed couples that had recovered from the husband's porn addiction. They found that one common factor was the husband making overt efforts towards change.
Okay.
Husbands who made verbal commitments to breaking their porn habit and backed that up with actions received more support from their wives and made greater progress.
Okay.
So this kind of ties a little bit to having a plan like we talked about before.
Yeah.
Examples of those actions include voluntarily signing up to therapy rather than being forced to go. Taking measures to make it harder for yourself to use porn in the future.
Okay.
Putting blocks in place.
Yeah.
More on that in the bonus guide, of course. But the point is, if you're being honest with your disclosure, you also need to carry through and be honest and open about it being a real problem that requires real solutions, and you're taking ownership of that.
Right. Don't minimize it. And yeah. Okay.
So helping individuals and marriages recover from pornography is one of our specialties at Only You Forever. So do feel free to get in touch with us through our website at onlyyouforever.com. We'd love to help you recover and heal from this addiction. Whether you're the one addicted or the betrayed spouse or both, we have team members specifically trained to deal with the people who want to recover from pornography, with betrayed spouses, and with couples going through this crisis.
Okay.
And even if there's adult children and disclosure to them is necessary, or teens, or we can help you with family complexities that arise.
Complexities are right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's wrap this up.
All right. We'd like to thank Kelly and Will and Jenny for becoming patrons between this recording and our previous one. Thank you so much for your support. Next week, we are talking about
ROCD, Relational Obsessive Compulsive Disorder.
Ooh, okay.
So if you find yourself fretting over whether your spouse is the right one for you or you're the right one for him or her, you may actually be struggling with ROCD.
Interesting.
Yep.
Cool. That's all for today's episode. You can get the full show notes at oyf.link/215. Find out how you can help marriages. Go to oyf.support. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.
The Marriage Podcast for Smart People is totally funded by listeners who support Caleb and Valinda in their mission to save marriages. If you would like to be part of this worthy cause, open your web browser to oyf.support. A minimum investment of $10 per month will help restore hope to married couples. Plus, as a patron, you'll gain access to exclusive bonus content and valuable information to help you succeed in your own marriage. Go to the website oyf.support now for more information. Thanks for listening to the Marriage Podcast for Smart People from Only You Forever.